Is Maki as strong as Toji? This is a question that has been on the forefront of many Jujutsu Kaisen fans' minds ever since she had her awakening and slaughtered the Zenin clan. Some think that while Maki has become much more powerful and closer to Toji in strength, she has not quite reached the level of the sorcerer killer. Others think that Maki has already reached the peaks that Toji has reached and only has the potential to go higher. So in this video, I will be taking a look at all of the evidence that Gege provided for us in order to determine whether or not Maki is truly the next Toji. To start off, let's take a look at many of the inverse comparisons fully realized Maki has to Toji Fushiguro and determine if they are reputable and do indeed imply that Maki is on Toji's level. The first of which comes from Megumi in chapter 113. In this chapter, Megumi makes a statement that connects Maki and Toji's physical ability and disposition in a way that we hadn't seen up to this point. He's like Maki, but fully realized. This single line right here basically outright states that if Maki were to have her cursed energy erased completely like Toji's, Megumi thinks that this is what she would be like. Based on his previous experiences with Maki and his ongoing fight with Toji, Megumi essentially thinks of Toji as Maki's full potential brought into reality. Now, at this point in the series, Megumi should at least have a rudimentary understanding of why Maki's physical strength is so impressive even with her lack of cursed energy control, and I would say that he put two and two together that Toji is a similar type of person based on the complete lack of cursed energy, his display versus Dagon, and even their own battle. Now, while this on its own is not conclusive proof of Maki equaling Toji's sets completely, it does lend credence to the idea that Gege has been laying the foundation for Maki to obtain power on his level. The next set of comparisons come directly after Mai sacrifices herself and Maki awakens completely. In chapters 149, 150, and 151, Maki is likened to Toji in several different ways. Ogi himself, just upon seeing her prepare for combat, sees the spitting image of Toji plastered right next to her and feels the fear that Toji must have made him feel in the past before getting absolutely slaughtered. Following the death of Ogi, Maki proceeds to tear through the Zenin clan with a vengeance, and Ranta also makes a very direct statement that would place Maki and Toji on the exact same pedestal. In his effort to stop her from erasing the clan altogether, he states that what Maki is doing is something that Toji could have done in the past himself. The ability to allow the clan to live means that Toji also had the power to snuff it out if he so chose, a power that he decided not to use during his lifetime. Unfortunately for the Zenin clan, Maki had no such desire and garnered the fear of just about everyone in her path. Unlike the other two instances of comparison where you can argue some sort of ambiguity or lack of information, Ranta isn't just thinking that the two are similar or that their presences are alike. He outright states that Maki is the same as Toji, which is a sentiment supported by mountains and mountains of evidence, implications, statements, and general lore. One counter to the presented arguments is the fact that Naoya, even after seeing Maki pull off her clan destruction, does not think that she and Toji stand in the same place. He doesn't acknowledge her power in any capacity and actually thinks himself to be on the same tier as Toji and Gojo, in the upper echelon of Jujutsu Kaisen characters. The problem with using Naoya's statement here as proof of anything or even a debunk of any implications and statements from Ranta, Ogi, and Megumi is that, well, Naoya is proven to be wrong, at least in terms of his power assessments. You see, if Naoya is on the same level as Toji, as he claims, and Maki isn't, it shouldn't have been possible for him to lose to a fatigued and weakened Maki. But as you know, if you've read the fights, that isn't quite what happened. After beating her up for a few pages while she gets accustomed to his technique, he absolutely gets smashed into the ground with a singular punch and gets all of his power scaling proven wrong within seconds. Based on this very obvious incorrectness and bias against Maki, it's very safe to conclude that Naoya should not be used as an authority on the relativity of Maki and Toji. But what if your issue isn't Naoya? What if your issue is feats? Maybe you're one of the people who thinks that Maki and Toji are probably close to each other scaling wise, but Maki, even in stats, is still inferior simply due to the fact that she has less showings, or that currently she hasn't proven that she can utilize this power with the same level of finesse that Toji did. Now, while I disagree with the conclusion drawn using this line of thinking, this skepticism does have some credence to it, which I'll address later, but it doesn't really have credence in the way that many of you may think. Everything in the series so far that has any sense of reliability points to Maki being as physically capable as Toji. Ogi thinks it, Megumi states it, Ranta states it. Hell, even the rules of the verse state that Maki and Toji should have the same physical capabilities simply because of their perfect heavenly restriction. Saying that even in spite of all of the evidence, you need a direct feat comparison between the two is definitely a bit odd, considering that similar statements in general lore are one of the many tactics that Gege uses to establish his top tier characters. Take Gojo and Sukuna for example. When basing their strength purely off of feats, you can't definitively say that they are the strongest. With Gojo, all he really displays feat-wise is the ability to fight a couple of special grade curses, which, while impressive, in isolation doesn't mean that he's stronger than everyone in the verse. With Sukuna, the gap between his strength when using only feats and his strength when combining it with lore and context is ridiculously large, because once again, based purely off of feats, Sukuna is a lot stronger than characters like Jogo and Maharaga, but they themselves don't have ridiculously high feats relative to the top few characters in the verse. The fact that you think either Gojo and or Sukuna are the top tiers of Jujutsu Kaisen means that on some level you are willing to factor in the lore surrounding these characters and statements made about them. Kenjaku's statements made about Gojo being too strong for his plans, Gojo calling himself the strongest, him being touted as the strongest by a majority of the verse, and even Gege saying that Gojo is the strongest or the ceiling of Jujutsu Kaisen on numerous occasions helped lead you to this conclusion. Without it, you don't really have Gojo being the strongest as definitively as many people do. No, I'm not trying to argue that Maki is the same in terms of being the strongest. All I'm saying is that the same logic should be applied to Maki. While she doesn't have feats necessarily that put her exactly where Toji would be, she has the statements, she has the lore, and she also has the narrative implications that compare her power directly to Toji's. You can even take it a step further and say that it is almost undeniable that Maki is as strong as Toji based on this volume extra statement that is just blatantly backing up all the narrative and thematic reasoning for it. Right here, we have confirmation from Gege's mouth that Maki became as strong as Toji post-awakening. And when you understand that there is only evidence that supports this idea, it becomes pretty clear that no matter how you feel about it, Maki and Toji statistically are equals. I will certainly concede that there is debate to be had about who would win between the two in an actual fight, but that isn't based on their physical capabilities at all, and would only revolve around who you think is the more skilled of a fighter, and maybe who has better tactics. Based on these two things, I wouldn't say that it's impossible to argue for Toji's victory, but once again, I'd like to reiterate that it would not at all be because there is a strength, speed, or durability difference, but merely because of a difference in experience and skill. If Toji's speed, strength, and durability sets were a 10 across the board, Maki's would be as well. Almost everyone that has seen both Toji and Maki have come to this conclusion. The feats shown by Maki support this conclusion, and Gege himself has made it abundantly clear that these two are meant to parallel each other's power moving forward, with Maki possibly even having a higher ceiling than Toji ever did. Maki paralleling Toji in this fashion means a lot not only for her power, but for her potential usefulness and development narratively down the road. And if you want to know exactly why that's the case, if you want a video talking about Toji himself and explaining why exactly her being similar to him is a great thing for Maki's character, check out this video right here.